Good morning. The August 4th, 2025 meeting of the Select Committee and Comprehensive Plan will come to order. It is 9:33 a.m. I am Joy Hollingsworth, Chair of the committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Juarez.
Here.
Councilmember Kettle.
Here.
Council President Nelson.
Present.
Councilmember Rink.
Present.
Councilmember Rivera.
Present.
Councilmember Saka.
Here.
Councilmember Strauss.
Here.
Vice Chair Solomon. Chair Hollingsworth.
Here.
There are 8 council members present.
Awesome. And for the record, Councilmember Solomon is excused. We will now consider, we will now consider the agenda. If there's no objections, the agenda will be adopted. Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Today for public, well, first of all, good morning and welcome everyone. Today, we will only be accepting written public comment. Please drop off your comments at the front of chambers and send us your thoughts on the comprehensive plan. Remember, this is a secret email. No one knows this. council@seattle.gov. The items of business today. Okay. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for joining me on this Monday morning. And I know that we have a lot to get through today, and so we really appreciate the public's engagement on this process. There's still plenty of time for you all to comment. We'll have a public hearing. Amendments are going to be posted for 30 days, and so there's still going to be time. We only are allowing written public comment today specifically because we have over 100 amendments. That was tailored down significantly, so really happy to hear that. Today, Central staff will be presenting on our collective group of amendments for the very first time. This is the time for us to learn about each other's amendments and understand the basics effort of each of these amendments, how they're organized into category with the presentation we'll be doing today. So you all have them, you all have in front of you or should have a sheet that has it by council member, but we'll be presenting today by categories. That way it's easier for us to navigate. Our central staff has been working exceptionally hard to prepare and review ready for the conversation today. As such, none of us have seen some of the amendments, and we'll be building some type of consensus package as well after this meeting in between now and the end of the month. Just for table setting today, and I believe every office knows, each council member is going to get 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to have some opening remarks about their amendments. Councilmember Strauss and Council President Nelson will have the opportunity to speak before they head off. Sorry, that sounds like I'm medieval times, head off. Before they go to a budget meeting that was previously scheduled. So I really appreciate their time and energy here today to join us before the important budget meeting that they have. Central staff will go over the title, sponsor, and each of the amendments. Should time allow at the end, we will then have time for discussion. I will ask colleagues if they will refrain from having discussion during the amendment process while central staff is presenting them. If you have a clarifying question, please raise your hand on the Zoom thing so we can move through these amendments, just getting them read into the record, and then we can have discussion at the end. Thank you all for your patience and understanding with our schedule for today. And please remember, this is just the beginning of the amendment process. I also want to set the table for today as well that this is phase 1 of the comprehensive plan. Phase 2 will begin after the budget concludes. We also have today permanent legislation, House Bill 1110 on the table, which has its own important implication as it's going to be woven throughout the discussion. To the public, our neighborhoods, and many engaged residents, I want to thank you for your participation. Your participation has been vital. It hasn't always been smooth and easy, and I recognize that. But I have seen firsthand the genuine effort by many council members who spent time, sometimes many evenings and weekends, with their neighbors, community groups, organizations to get inputs at the night, in the grocery store, everywhere, on the bus, everywhere. We have been engaged with you online. We have been engaged with you. I also want to recognize and acknowledge Councilmember Morales and her team for the early ground level outreach and engagement that they did. That body of work, those notes, and the feedback were graciously shared with our office before her transition. And we are deeply appreciative of the foundation that it provided. Colleagues, now we are going to jump into it with our opening remarks, and we are going to first start. Remember, this is 2 minutes that you'll have your opening remarks about your process, your amendments, anything you want to say before we jump in to the amendments, and we will go down the line. So, oh, I didn't read agenda item number 1 into the record. You see how it happens when I just go off the top? Okay, so before we do that, will the clerk please read agenda item number 1 into the record?
Agenda item number 1 is Council Bill 120985, an ordinance relating to land use and zoning, repealing and replacing the Seattle Comprehensive Plan pursuant to a major update with new goals, policies, and elements, and a new future land use map. Agenda item 2 is Council Bill 120993, an ordinance relating to land use and zoning, implementing a major update of neighborhood residential zones, and modifying development standards in other zones to comply with various state laws. This is for briefing and discussion only.
Okay, awesome. I know we already have our presenters to the table, and we will go in this order, colleagues. Council President Nelson, followed by Council Member Strauss, followed by Council Member Juarez, Council Member Kettle, Council Member Rink, Council Member Rivera, Council Member Saka, Vice Chair Solomon, and then myself. And so, and if you don't have any comments, no need to take up 2 minutes. You cannot give them to another council member, but you can pass them on. And so, Councilmember President Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Hollingsworth. And for the public's awareness, I have to depart right after this because I'm late for a meeting on the August economic forecast. I wanted to take a moment to explain the rationale behind the majority of my amendments, which is that basically, broadly speaking, when given the choice between a carrot or a stick, I'm a carrot person. And meaning that I believe that incentivizing the behavior we need to see to reach our policy goals is what I'm after here. And those policy goals, be that protecting trees or making housing more affordable or whatever, that is my tell. And that's why I was happy to craft a package of 7 amendments with the Complete Communities Coalition representing HDC, the Chamber, FutureWise, Tech for Housing, NAOP, Habitat for Humanity, and Master Builders that provide, for example, additional height or FAR in exchange for developers adding affordable units to lots. Because we've got a housing affordability crisis, and we're not going to be able to subsidize our way out of it. So that means we have to make housing easier to build, which is why I'm introducing 2 permitting reform bills this week, and also ensure that they can get off the ground. And so that's what these incentives are intended to do. And this morning we began receiving constituent emails expressing support for my amendments and basically saying what they do. And again, I'm sorry that I can't go into the other amendments. There are 10 of them, but I look forward to working with you all and answering questions, first of all, and working with you all in hopes that they will earn your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council President Nelson. Councilmember Strauss.
Thank you, Chair. I will do my best to be brief as we need to move on to this next meeting. Today, I am proposing amendments to the Seattle Comprehensive Plan focused on building more housing, combating climate change, protecting Seattle's tree canopy, and creating more opportunities for our smallest businesses. This includes proposing several options to fine-tune the boundaries of each proposed new neighborhood center in District 6 without sacrificing the density. I was just getting ribbed by my colleague, Councilmember Juarez, for having so many amendments. 27. And that's because not all of these amendments will go forward. So first, let's discuss the maps. The boundaries, which are the boundaries of the neighborhood centers. In this process of reviewing the comp plan, I've met with neighbors who live in and around these neighborhood centers for the last 8 months. My amendments continue this engagement process as more feedback is needed before final decision-making time. For each of these neighborhood center proposals, or for each neighborhood center, I'm putting forward 3 options: option A, option B, and option C. These refinements were developed by reviewing grade differentials in neighborhoods and the street grid attributes, including connection. Ultimately, and this is the part where 27 amendments will get reduced very rapidly, ultimately only 1 amendment for each neighborhood center will move forward to committee in September. This step in the process is important to me because I would like to receive more feedback on which of these 3 options is best. But that would not be possible if I only posted 1 amendment for this comment period. I will use the time between now and September and our September Comprehensive Plan meeting to meet with community members to continue the outreach and engagement. After meeting with community, I will only bring forward 1 amendment for each neighborhood center in September. The biggest outlier of all these maps are the options in Magnolia. Magnolia also has different attributes than any other neighborhood in the city because the street grid only connects to other neighborhoods on 1 of 3 sides. Also, it has 2 hills and a valley. Working with community members, it is quite clear that when we take the 20-plus year planning view in Magnolia, it's clear the valley is where growth should focus as it connects to the rest of the neighborhood from all sides. This is why, after working with community members, Magnolia has 9 proposed amendments, 3 for the Magnolia Village and 3 for North Magnolia, as well as 3 for the Magnolia Valley. So 9 may only become 1 or 2, and we'll talk about that here. So in September, I will either only put forward 1 amendment for Magnolia Village and North Magnolia for a result of 2 amendments, or I will only put forward 1 amendment for the Magnolia Valley. I'll be taking time between now and September Comprehensive Plan Committee to meet with community members to receive feedback on which proposal I should put forward. I'm using this amendment process to continue the outreach and engagement so as to include Seattleites in the decision-making process. Within the comp plan itself, I have amendments that highlight the importance of stewarding the environment to protect our animals and insects, supporting our smallest businesses that make up the fabric of Seattle, and supporting our neighborhood stores, creating community centers, cultural gathering spaces, and parks in our urban centers, supporting multi-generational families living together, and culturally based housing for elders. I also have amendments that allow for more density if it creates affordable housing or preserves trees, and some specific language around neighborhood centers and about neighborhood centers and urban centers near light rail. I'm also proposing changes to the tree code. I'll speak on this more at a later time because to amend the tree code, there really should be a dedicated process that is focused on tree policy and tree policy alone. I'll speak more about that process later. Today, I have 5 amendments. 1 is to amend the tree protection area to be the drip line of the tree. The second is to protect tier 1 and 2 trees within 5 feet of a corner of a property. The third is to add flexibility for front and rear setbacks and amenity areas if a tree is preserved. Fourth is requiring a tree to be planted no matter what for every 2,500 square feet, or the requirements mandated by the tree points code or tree point system in the code, whichever is greater. And lastly, again, the density bonus for protecting trees. This stage in the process, publishing our amendments for the 30-day comment period is incredibly important. For me, I'm using this part of the process to continue the conversation with Seattleites and District 6 residents so that we can work together to shape the policies that guide growth for the next 20 years. Thank you, Chair. I will now be excused for my other committee meeting, and I will be back as soon as I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Strauss. Councilmember Juarez. I'm good. Awesome. You gave your time to Councilmember Strauss, I know.
To the gentleman from District 6.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Kettle.
Thank you, Council President. I'm always here for,
I'm Chair.
sorry, out of habit. Chair Hollingsworth. No, there's lots to unpack there, but always willing to cede some time for my District 6 representative as well, if needed, but not now. Thank you, Chair. I have basically 5 areas of amendments. The first one is no surprise, the public safety amendment. I've been talking about this a lot, and this is something that's, the LA wildfires, the flooding in central Texas, last week's earthquake and tsunami out of Kamchatka Peninsula, and the threats that we have. There's those pieces. But we're growing as a city, and we also need to grow our capacity in public safety. So looking at North Precinct, hey, they have needs. They already have needs. But with this building, this densification that's going to happen, we may have to do to the north what happened in the south, have 2 precincts. We need to think these things through. We need something for Lake Union, Harbor Patrol, maybe use care there. So we need to have this public safety element be part of the planning process. It needs to be front of mind and not buried in an appendix. Number 2, the Queen Anne Boulevard Park, bringing back the same amendment that we had on the interim HB 1110 legislation. Same pieces, and since then I've had some great conversations with stakeholders in Queen Anne, but also around the city, Seattle neighborhood greenways, talking about how can we make elements of it, shared streets. How can we create, improve and then really create an even better amenity for the entire city. So that's the Queen Anne Boulevard Park. Third, centers. Speaking of the park, there's a tweak to the north part of the Queen Anne Urban Center as it relates to how the Boulevard Park comes down and then back up north of McGraw. But then create a Nickerson neighborhood center. Building on the idea that I've been talking about, a neighborhood village, and there's going to be some other neighborhood villages popping up soon as we move through this process. And then lastly, extend the Queen Anne Urban Center down to Roy Street and Uptown. This is something I worked with OPCD on, and basically it's a 1-for-1 swap that also works with PSRC and on how they do business. And basically, in a way, stand up for Queen Anne, as I often get reminded. And the fourth bucket is livability and tree retention. Looking to provide bonuses in terms of support for our trees, and also looking at side yard setback flexibility. That's really important. Try to create opportunities where we can increase and densify our housing, but at the same time protect our trees. And then the last group, if you will, is a variety of housing. We need to have diverse housing types. We can't have just skinny townhomes. This is where HB 1110 comes in. So how do we make that happen? How do we create those various housing types that are part of that middle housing happen? So there's a series of amendments related to that topic, similar to, I think, to some of my colleagues, and I'm sure will be under your leadership chair will be brought together in a package related to how can we really create a diverse set of housing to really allow for our community to grow, up into a home maybe, or town, to have that variety and then allow for that flexibility in the market and flexibility as people go through their lives and creating that kind of strong market for housing. So those are the 5 amendments groups that I have: public safety element, Queen Anne Boulevard Park, some work on the centers that relates to primarily to Queen Anne, though there will be neighborhood villages, which also will go into Magnolia. Livability and tree retention, in addition, in partnership with densification on the housing, and then creating a diverse set of housing, particularly within the middle housing effort that we're undertaking. And with that, Chair, I'm done. Hopefully that was in 2 minutes. It was quicker than my D6 colleagues.
No worries. Thank you, Councilmember Kettle. You're good. I'm not going to cut the mic at 2 minutes like we do for public commenters. But y'all are seeing now how hard it is for 2 minutes, aren't you? You see how hard. This is the exercise. Councilmember Rink, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us a taste of our own medicine. Good reminder. Good morning, everybody. Simply put, Seattle needs more housing. Seattle also needs full and thriving communities, and we've heard an overwhelming call on council from constituents to achieve these goals with more housing, especially in high opportunity neighborhoods, which haven't seen proportional growth. My 21 amendments work to address these problems by expanding the number of neighborhood centers, which will allow for more housing and neighbors to live there, but also for our local restaurants to have more customers, more accessible parks and green spaces, more accessibility for our disabled community, more for everyone. And these centers were studied and selected because they're in high opportunity neighborhoods. It would be great if more folks could be able to live in these incredible neighborhoods in our city. Now, according to Axios, our census estimates demonstrate that Seattle was among the US cities with the highest overall population growth last year, adding nearly 17,000 new residents in 2024. And for the first time ever, Seattle has officially surpassed the 800,000 population mark. We are so lucky to lead and represent a city that so many people want to live in. And to make sure we have the housing we need for all of our neighbors, our legacy neighbors and new neighbors, we will need to take bold steps, even if they aren't easy. But Seattle is resilient, and with the housing crisis hitting us, we need to move forward, not backwards. I'm also bringing forward a number of new amendments directly from community stakeholders like Corner Store Advocacy, Wanawari, Black Legacy Homeowners, and the Complete Communities Coalition, which itself represents over 60 organizations. And thanks to them, we're bringing forward amendments to allow for neighborhood corner stores citywide, named TBD. I know there's been some discussion about what we call them if they're not necessarily on corners. Stores, who knows? Bodegas, we will see. You will also see we're bringing forward amendments related to cutting red tape to allow for red tape that can make developing housing expensive, but also amendments related to preventing displacement and supporting frontline communities. And you'll also see that I'm bringing forward a number of amendments related to parking. Spokane, Bellingham, Bothell, Port Townsend, and it looks like soon to be Shoreline have eliminated parking requirements. Because not only do we continue to see parking add to the cost to develop housing, but we also see that these requirements don't necessarily deliver on their promise of managing curb space. So hoping we can take up that discussion here on what this can mean for our city. Seattle must do more, and it's on us to act. So for expanding our housing options, ensuring a healthy next generation, connecting our neighborhoods, and building towards that green energy future and addressing climate change, and lastly, we want to make sure that working people are thriving here. This is an exciting opportunity, and I look forward to working with all of you on your amendments. Thank you. Was that 2 minutes, Chair?
2:56. Thank you, Councilmember Rink. So close.
Madam Chair,
That's okay. Councilmember Juarez.
I want to apologize. I did have something to say real quick, but
Absolutely.
Okay.
Councilmember Juarez, you're recognized, followed by Councilmember Rivera.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can go after Councilmember Rivera.
It's okay.
It's okay? Okay.
Yes, of course.
I just realized something when we were going through the documents, and I wanted certainly staff to know and the public to know that I am aware of the comp plan. I am aware of the amendments. We've been working on this, and I remember when we were working on the numbers back in 2019, when King County said they were anticipating 112,000 housing and 170,000 new jobs. And in 2021, Seattle was anticipating 172,000 housing, 246,000 new jobs. Also, the current targets that we were looking at as well. And House Bill 1110, which is anticipating another 65,000. And One Seattle, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, anticipating that you can go up to 300,000 new housing, that our zoning capacity has increased. And so it's exciting for me to be back again to see a lot of this has moved forward. A lot of people think we don't get stuff done, but it looks like we got stuff done. And I'm just going to do one last plug of what I've always said about when we did HALA, when we did MHA, when we were doing up zones. I've always felt, and I still believe my North Star for the 2025 Seattle Comp Plan is that the half-mile radius around a child's home should be our North Star. That the comp plan must be forward-looking and integrate economic upward mobility across this great city. And that every neighborhood and every kid and everyone who lives here should have the good stuff. Transit, community center, libraries, parks, green space, economic opportunity and access, education, a healthy environment. And I just want to, and I can't say this enough, I want to thank the leadership here, because you are and have been the local government level decision makers. And I think I said this during the process when we were filling this seat, and I truly meant it. All of us share leadership, and I know this isn't any Native American wisdom, because it's like a flock of birds. There isn't just one bird that says, hey, everybody, we're going south, follow me. You literally have to all work together to say this is the direction we're going, and people take turns being on the front and the side and the back, just like we do in Indian country. We lead from behind to make sure elders and our children get there first, but we share leadership. And I want to say to you and the talks that we've had, thank you so much for bringing me up to speed, and I'm really appreciating how you're managing 106 amendments and a comp plan. And yeah, 27 is a lot. I was going to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Juarez. Councilmember Rivera, you're recognized.
Here we go, 2 minutes. Good morning, colleagues. I'm bringing 5 amendments to the comp plan relating to both the boundaries of neighborhood centers in my district and the protection of the city's tree canopy. Based on months of feedback from community members who live in and near the proposed neighborhood centers, my amendments modify the boundaries of the neighborhood centers in the D4, including Wedgwood, Bryant, and Ravenna, to reflect resident concerns. I made the changes based on reviewing the existing business areas in the centers, reliable transit options, and concerns around the ability of local neighborhood streets to handle increased growth and the infrastructure. I also brought an amendment to make permanent the same one I brought for the interim HB 1110 legislation, which passed. It allows historic districts, such as the Ravenna County Historic District, to regulate design standards for siding and cladding. This is allowable under HB 1110. I brought 2 amendments, or I'm bringing 2 amendments that are related to the protection of Seattle's tree canopy to advance the city's environmental and climate resilience goals. Since the start of my term, colleagues, I have heard from many constituents who believe Seattle has not done enough to protect our existing trees and replace those that are removed. You have heard me and former Councilmember Moore talk about the great value of our tree canopy and how important tree preservation is to the residents of D4 and 5. As I have said before, I believe we can have increased density and trees. We must, because the climate crisis is now. Given the new state law, HB 1110, which ends single-family zoning and requires that Seattle and other cities allow 4 more units to be built on a single lot, and the updating of our city's comprehensive plan, we must act now to align our climate resilience goals with our density goals. I believe these amendments will help do that. I'm bringing these tree amendments in partnership with the residents of the D4 and 5, who have in turn been working with residents across the city who also care about the tree canopy and the preservation of trees as we plan for growth. And in particular, I want to thank former Councilmember Moore for her partnership on this issue. Former Councilmember Moore had been working for a long time on responding to the needs of community on tree preservation. So these amendments have been a long time in the making in partnership with community and the product of our joint efforts. We have worked with community to find areas of compromise so we can protect our trees while allowing development. Both objectives can and should be accomplished, but we need to be thoughtful in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rivera. Councilmember Saka.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, colleagues, members of the public. First and foremost, I want to thank our central staff experts for their incredible work in drafting these many complex, nuanced amendments on behalf of my office. And all of us, I think, can celebrate the work of our central staff. And I especially want to thank the many constituents who shared your thoughtful input. Your voices truly shaped this work. My amendments reflect what we heard directly from our community. While not every single concern is captured, I welcome my colleagues' proposals, especially on key issues like tree protection in areas like South Park and West Seattle. My amendments at a high level generally fall into 3 categories or buckets, if you will. 1, signaling intent through a companion resolution. 2, reinforcing existing policy. And 3, advancing new direction. Highlights of my amendments include minor boundary changes to 3 neighborhood centers and 1 name update based on having walked all 9 District 1 neighborhood centers. 6 transportation amendments aligning more closely with the Seattle Transportation Plan that we adopted last year. Incentives to support affordable cottage home ownership. Focus attention on the Duwamish Valley, addressing flooding, workforce development, and creating low pollution, low carbon neighborhoods. It called for more equitable placement of human services across the city, not just heavily concentrated in downtown. Shoring up our infrastructure more broadly, including sidewalks, drainage, wastewater, and the like. Good governance items like stronger public notification and addressing the vacant lot directly across the street from City Hall. Colleagues, looking ahead, I also plan to bring future amendments on issues like lighting our freeway infrastructure, including I-5, and reconnecting South Park, along with improving earthquake preparedness. Thank you. Just a little over 2 minutes. 2:05 I got.
Thank you, that was impressive. Thank you, Councilmember Saka. Really appreciate you all. I'll hold my comments. We'll jump right into it. And for the record, none of you were under 2 minutes.
Closest?
Staff, you were the closest. Thank you, Councilmember Saka. Please state your name for the record, and you can jump right into the amendments. Thank you.
Liz Schwitzen, Council Central Staff.
H.B. Harper, Central Staff.
Council Central Staff.
So good morning. As you've heard, there are 106 amendments that we're going to walk through today. 53 of them are amendments to the bill to amend the comprehensive plan, and 53 are amendments to the permanent legislation to implement House Bill 1110. We've organized these amendments for the comprehensive plan, generally based on the elements of the comprehensive plan. So we'll start at the beginning of the plan with the growth strategy element and walk through the different elements of the plan. Amendments to House Bill 1110 are grouped by topics. So we'll start out with accessory dwelling units and end up with trees. Yeah, I'll jump right in. Amendment 1 is sponsored by Councilmember Rink. It adds both discussion language and policy language to the growth strategy and land use elements to recognize the importance of childcare in the city.
Amendment number 2, also sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would add a new policy, Land Use 1.8, to the land use element of the comprehensive plan that would support zoning pilot programs such as Roots to Roofs to encourage development and partnership structures to mitigate displacement and promote equitable development.
And before you continue, I apologize. Colleagues, if you have clarifying questions as we are going through these, more than welcome, raise your hand so we can connect with central staff. If not, we'll just wait till the end of the amendments and then we can ask questions. My apologies. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Amendment 3 is an amendment to the land use element discussion of industrial zones and is intended to recognize the importance of maritime and industrial employment lands in the city. It's sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth. Amendment 4 is sponsored by Councilmember Saka. It states that housing should not be permitted in areas within the station area overlay district where it is not currently permitted. So should not be permitted east of or west of First Avenue South. Amendment 5 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss and supports increased access to food through zoning flexibility and development of food in food deserts, or increasing food access in food deserts. Amendment 6 is also sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It amends the land use element to support multi-generational housing. Amendment 7 is sponsored by Councilmember Rink. This is the only amendment in the comp plan bill that also requires an amendment to the permanent House Bill 1110 bill. This bill would amend the city's policies related to parking to end the city's practice of requiring off-street parking with development. And it requires zoning changes to accompany it. And we'll talk about those probably in an hour or so. Amendment 8 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It would recognize that we currently apply maximum parking requirements in our regional centers, particularly those with light rail stations. Amendment 9 is sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth. It would amend the transportation element to support safe and efficient truck movement through industrial lands. Amendment 10 is sponsored by Councilmember Saka. It adds a policy on transit security to the transportation element. Amendment 12 is sponsored by Councilmember Saka. It amends the transportation element to support closing gaps in the sidewalk network. Amendment 12 is an amendment to the transportation element by Councilmember Saka. It adds a new policy on transportation infrastructure and maintaining and preserving the current transportation network and systems. Amendment 13 is an amendment by Councilmember Saka to amend the policy on electric vehicle charging in the transportation element, including micromobility. Amendment 14 adds 2 new policies to the transportation element on pavement and bridge condition, also sponsored by Councilmember Saka. Amendment 15 is an amendment proposed by Councilmember Saka to add a new policy about potholes and repairing them. Amendment 16 is an amendment to the transportation element proposed by Councilmember Saka to expand a policy on low carbon, low pollution neighborhoods and emphasizing the neighborhoods in the Duwamish Valley, which have been historically impacted by pollution. Amendment 17 is an amendment to the housing element proposed by Councilmember Rink. It would incorporate the concept of social housing into the comprehensive plan. It's a series of amendments to the housing element. Amendment 18 is proposed by Councilmember Hollingsworth. It expands a policy in the housing element related to housing strategies for communities most impacted by discrimination and injustice to ensure that those communities have equitable access to a healthy built environment. Amendment 19 would add a policy to the housing element, adding a new goal for multi-bedroom residential units, units with more than with 2 or more bedrooms. Amendment 20 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It supports, it adds a policy to the housing element to support cultural housing for seniors. Amendment 21 is sponsored by the Council President. It is one of 2 policies that are based on an existing policy in the downtown neighborhood plan. The downtown neighborhood plan is proposed to be removed. This would restore components of that policy to consider the needs of target populations in locating human service facilities and seeking to avoid overconcentration of human service facilities. This is one version of that amendment. There's a second version sponsored by Councilmembers Saka and Solomon that maintain the current policy's focus on downtown Seattle. This is, 2 versions of a similar concept. Amendment 23 is sponsored by Councilmember Saka. amendment to the utilities element, seeking to consider programs to equitably balance the cost of infrastructure improvements, utility infrastructure improvements. Amendment 24 is proposed by Councilmember Saka. It is an amendment to the economic development element, policy on community development and workforce development strategies, and to emphasize the importance of those strategies to neighborhoods in the Duwamish Valley that have experienced historic disinvestment. Amendment 25 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It amends the economic development element to emphasize the importance of support for the smallest businesses in our neighborhood business districts.
Amendment number 26, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, is related to the city's natural capital. It would add a new policy to the climate and environment element, CE 7.8, that would include a policy to encourage sustainable management of public and private urban forests and open space.
Yeah. And the numbering there is incorrect. This is policy 26. Amendment 27 is sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth. It voices support for convenient access to culturally relevant, equitable, and nutritious food, and supports work to reduce food insecurity. It's an amendment to the climate and environment element. Amendment 28 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It adds a number of policies to the climate and environment element to recognize the importance of trees, bees, herons, eagles, orca, and other plants and animals in our natural environment to the city and to the natural environment. Amendment 29 is a proposal from Councilmember Strauss to amend the Parks and Open Space element to support the development of parks in regional and urban centers. Amendment 30 is also sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It amends the Parks and Open Space element to support the creation of community centers in regional and urban centers. Amendment 31 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It amends the comprehensive plan to support the creation of cultural gathering places. This is in the arts and culture element.
Amendment 32 would add a public safety element sponsored by Councilmember Kettle. This would restore policies from the existing comprehensive plan in the community well-being element and add new policies as well.
Amendment 33 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It would amend the policy related to neighborhood centers to support zoning that allows buildings greater than 6 stories, particularly near light rail stations or existing concentrations of amenities and services. And this kicks off a set of amendments proposed to change the future land use map and other maps in the comprehensive plan related to neighborhood centers. The first amendment is sponsored by Councilmember Rink. It would add 8 new neighborhood centers across the city in Alki, Broadview, Dawson, Gasworks, Loyal Heights, Nickerson South Canal, Roanoke Park, and South Wedgwood. And includes maps of each of those new neighborhood centers. Okay. Amendment 35 is proposed by Councilmember Saka. It changes the name of the proposed end-of-line neighborhood center to Fauntleroy and makes 2 changes to the boundary of the neighborhood center. Amendment 36 is also proposed by Councilmember Saka. It adds a block to the High Point neighborhood center. Amendment 37 is sponsored by Councilmember Saka. It removes the small area from the Morgan Junction neighborhood or urban center. Amendment 38 is sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth. It removes a couple of portions with steep slopes from the Madrona neighborhood center. Amendment 39 is sponsored by Councilmember Rivera. It would amend the Bryant neighborhood center boundaries. Amendment 40 is sponsored by Councilmember Rivera. It amends the Ravenna neighborhood center to remove the Ravenna National Historic District from the neighborhood center. Amendment 41, sponsored by Councilmember Rivera, would amend the boundaries of the Wedgwood neighborhood center. And Councilmember Rivera, I think this may be the wrong map. My apologies. So we'll get that fixed.
Thank you.
Amendment 42 is the first of a number of amendments from Councilmember Strauss that, as you heard, proposes 3 different versions for each of the neighborhood centers in his district. But the first one is a new neighborhood center that Councilmember Strauss is proposing to add at 8th and 8th Avenue Northwest and Northwest 65th Street. He's calling the East Ballard Neighborhood Center, and there are 3 versions of those boundaries. There are new boundaries for a proposed single Magnolia Neighborhood Center. 3 versions that would extend from West Government Way all the way down to West McGraw Street. Version 2, version 3. Amendment 44 is also from Councilmember Strauss. Instead of Amendment 43, he is putting on the table potentially amending the Magnolia Village Neighborhood Center, which is the southern portion of that last neighborhood center that you saw, with version 1, version 2, and version 3. Amendment 45 is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss for a North Magnolia Neighborhood Center. This is the northern portion of that neighborhood center of Magnolia, and he has 3 versions of an amendment of a neighborhood center at the northern portion of Magnolia along West Government Way. Amendment 46 are Councilmember Strauss's 3 versions of the Finney Ridge Neighborhood Center. 1, 2, 3. Amendment 47 are 3 versions of a Tangletown Neighborhood Center. 1, 2, 3. And Amendment 48 are 3 versions of an Upper Fremont Neighborhood Center. Amendment 49 are 3 versions of West Green Lake Neighborhood Center. All right, leaving District 6. Amendment 50 is a new neighborhood center proposed by Councilmember Kettle for the North Queen Anne Nickerson neighborhood. near Seattle Pacific University, south of the Fremont Bridge. Amendment 51 is a proposal to take some area that was proposed to be added to the Uptown Regional Center and instead add that area to the Upper Queen Anne Urban Center. And there's an inset so you can see the exact boundaries a little bit easier. All right, and that's the end of changes to the centers. Amendment 52 is another amendment to the Council Bill 120985 that would amend the comprehensive plan. That bill also includes some land use code amendments. This is an amendment to amend that bill related to, sorry, Keto, I'm jumping on your amendment.
You're good.
Related to SEEP, but I'll let Keto talk about it.
Oh, okay. So as Liz mentioned, amendments 52 and 53 are to Council Bill 120985, which is primarily a bill that amends the comprehensive plan. That bill, if it passes, makes a lot of changes to the names of planning geographies in the city and adds new geographies. So it also amends some of the sections of the code that touch on those geographies. Amendment number 52, sponsored by Council President Nelson, would exempt from State Environmental Policy Act review all residential and mixed-use development. That exemption is allowed under some recent changes to state law. In order to actually follow through on this amendment, the city will need to identify some mitigation measures that come from the final environmental impact statement to the comprehensive plan. But it would exempt broadly most residential and mixed-use development in the city for the duration of the planning period. That's amendment number 52. Amendment number 53, sponsored by Councilmember Saka, would add neighborhood centers to the list of planning geographies where pedestrian improvements are required when a certain amount of development or subdivision of lots occur.
And we have gone halfway, gone through all of the amendments to Council Bill 120985.
Awesome. Thank you, Lish, Ketel, and HB. I will pause here for colleagues to have any questions that they want to clarify. Please just raise your hand on the screen. I'll be letting Councilmember Strauss know on his Amendment 28. I would like otters to be added to the list of animals. I'm just playing. Okay. I wrote that down so I wouldn't forget the number. But I will pause here to see if there's any council members that have any questions. I know it's a lot to absorb and a lot to take in. We can continue to power through and hold questions to the end as well. But I'm going to look down to my right and left. I know a lot of people are absorbing a lot of this. Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. And I was I was trying to keep it to 2 minutes. I didn't succeed, but in that vein, I neglected to thank you for your leadership on this process. It has been a long road, so I really want to acknowledge you and your staff for all the hard work and all the support you've provided my office as part of this process. So really want to acknowledge you and thank you and your staff. And I also want to thank our central staff for all the hard work and just the very long hours that you've all put into this process with these 106 amendments and all the advice that all three of you have provided through this process for many, many months now. I feel like since I got here last January, we've been talking about this and working on this. So really want to thank you, Lish, Ketel, and HB for all the hard work. So wanted to acknowledge that. I do have a broad question about how the process will be for some of these amendments are similar and they do slightly something different. And so how does that all get presented in the end? Or will they, because there needs to be some marriage, if you will, one way or another. And so I wondered if, and Chair, if we should wait till the next the end of it, because I'm sure this applies to the full thing. I'm fine with that too. I just have a question about how the process for that.
Lish?
So I think each of you has a meeting scheduled with the chair to talk about your priorities. I think the intent is to pull together substitute bills for both bills that reflect a general consensus on the council. There will likely be amendments that don't make it to those packages. Our hope is that council members will work together to come to consensus on language or approach, but there will be disagreements in any legislative body, and so we'll have some amendments that come forward in about a month and a half, I guess it is, for the vote.
Chair, we'll have about a month to try to work with colleagues for ones that are similar before, and seeing if we could find points of compromise before we come forward.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that, Lish. And one last thing, if I may, I also neglected to thank our newest council member down there who represents the D5. And though I was working long-term with, or for a long time with former council member Moore, I am so looking forward to working with you on the comp plan and the parts of this that there's overlap, because there's a lot of overlap between our districts, which you and I have talked about. And I'm so looking forward to work with you on these. So I didn't mean to, because I named council member Moore, I wanted to acknowledge you and your engagement. So thank you, council member Juarez. Thank you, Chair.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Rivera. I don't see any other hands, so I think we can power through. Some council members are going to save their questions till the end, because it's a lot to absorb. So I guess we will thank you all, and we'll just keep powering through.
Great. Amendment 54 is amendment to Council Bill 120993. It would amend provisions related to unit lot subdivisions to allow accessory dwelling units, detached accessory dwelling units, to be subdivided from the principal unit as part of a unit lot subdivision.
Amendment 55 would allow larger maximum sizes for accessory dwelling units rather than capping them at 1,000 square feet. In certain situations, they could be up to 1,500 square feet. And those situations would be if a lot is located in a low-rise zone near frequent transit and if it has not been purchased for value for 20 years, so trying to get at that legacy homeowner concept. Amendment 56 would exempt accessory dwelling units from counting towards floor area ratio calculations. These are both sponsored by Councilmember Rink. And as you may know, we calculate density in a couple different ways. Floor area ratio is one of them. We also calculate it by maximum density units per lot area, and so you'll see an amendment on that coming up. Amendment 57, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, allows larger maximum size for accessory dwelling units across the board, so not specific to legacy homeowners. It would increase the size from 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. Amendment 58, also sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would exclude ADUs from density calculations. So this is that other side of the sort of density coin, the different ways that we calculate density, ensuring that only principal dwelling units are counted towards density. Amendment 59, also sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would exempt accessory dwelling units from mandatory housing affordability, our MHA program. Amendment 60, sponsored by Council President, would expand affordable housing bonus in neighborhood residential zones. So as proposed, the legislation requires that low-income housing only qualify for alternative standards if it's located within a frequent transit service area. This amendment would remove the requirement that it be located in a frequent transit service area, allowing the affordable housing bonus to be utilized anywhere in the neighborhood residential zone. It would also increase the FAR, floor area ratio limit, from 1.8 to 2.0 and allow for no minimum required parking for low-income development in neighborhood residential. Amendment 61, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would add social housing to the category of alternative standards for development. So low-income housing development bonus would be available to social housing, which would be defined as housing built by a public development authority. And it would also remove that requirement that the lot be located within a frequent transit service area. So this amendment would both expand the existing affordable housing bonus that's being transmitted, as well in terms of where it can be utilized, and it would expand it to also apply to social housing development without any income restrictions. And similarly to the last amendment, it would allow for no minimum required parking for both those low-income housing developments and social housing development. Amendment 62, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would extend the affordable housing bonus to social housing, similar to the last one, without any other changes to the low-income housing development bonus program. So we would add the social housing development definition for public development authorities, but otherwise not change any requirements of the neighborhood residential low-income housing development affordable housing bonus. Amendment 63, sponsored by Council President Nelson, would expand the affordable housing bonus. Now we're looking at the low-rise zones, so the multifamily zones. So as transmitted, the proposed legislation includes a bonus in multifamily zones for affordable housing on properties owned or controlled by religious organizations. This amendment would create a broader affordable housing bonus provision in multifamily zones with higher development standards, similarly structured to the bonus as transmitted. Amendment 64, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, very similar to the last one, expands that affordable housing bonus in multifamily zones, and again retains the existing bonus that's been transmitted that only applies to multifamily zones on properties that are owned or controlled by religious organizations. So keeping that bonus program on the books, but allowing those same bonus provisions to apply to any lot if at least 50% of the units are affordable. Amendment 65, sponsored by the Council President. Now we're shifting topics again to corner stores. As transmitted, the legislation would require that any commercial uses in residential zones be located on corner lots. This is commonly known as corner stores in neighborhood neighborhood residential. So this amendment would remove the requirement that that ground floor commercial use be on a corner lot. So it would allow it on any lot in the neighborhood residential zone. But otherwise, the provisions of the bill as transmitted are retained. So that's distinct from Amendment 66, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, which would remove that requirement that it be located on a corner lot. So corner stores would be able to be anywhere, just stores. It would also broaden the commercial uses that are allowed slightly from restaurants only to all kinds of eating and drinking establishments. This amendment would also remove the square footage cap of 2,500 square feet, so there would be no size limit. And it would remove the requirement that businesses may not be open between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So there would be no hours requirement as part of Amendment 66 for commercial uses in neighborhood residential. On the same topic, Amendment 67, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, would go back to kind of the more simple version we saw earlier, where we would allow commercial uses on any lot, not just on corner lots in neighborhood residential, but otherwise the provisions are the same.
Amendment number 68, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would authorize the SDCI director to waive certain development standards for residential conversions in NR zones. Those standards include amenity areas, design standards for NR development, parking location and access, and structure width and depth. Conversion for the purposes of that section would be defined as keeping an existing residential structure intact without the addition of interior floor area. Councilmember Rink, amendment number, we're on to number 69 here. Councilmember Rink, amendment number 69, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would allow a minimum amount of developable floor area for very small lots. The current FAR regulations that are proposed below a certain point, about 4,000 square feet for a lot, would make it impossible to build a structure with 2,500 square feet. So it would establish a minimum floor area for development of very small lots.
Amendment 70, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would increase the floor area ratio for the densest developments and stacked flats within neighborhood residential. Amendment 71, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would reorder some language slightly to clarify density allowances. So allowing that a lot may be developed with up to 4 units, which is not a change, but sort of putting that up front and moving some wording about lots that have critical areas that are at least allowed 1 unit per lot down to the section that deals with critical areas.
Amendment number 72, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would amend density limits to allow portions of a lot that's in an environmentally critical area, except for submerged lands and areas within shoreline setbacks, to count towards density calculations. Does not permit development in environmentally critical areas, but it allows that area to be counted towards the amount of allowable development on a lot.
Amendment 73, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, would change the transmitted legislation such that fractions in density calculations could be rounded up if they are over 0.85. So as transmitted, any fraction in a density calculation is rounded down, but this amendment would allow for any fraction that is over 0.85 to be rounded up to constitute 1 additional unit.
Amendment number 74, sponsored by Council President Nelson, would increase the maximum structure height at NR and LR1 zones from 32 feet to 35 feet, which is the maximum allowed under House Bill 1110. The 3-foot increase would not allow for additional floor area, but would allow for higher floor-to-floor ceiling heights.
All right. Amendment 75, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would incorporate language that's currently applied in areas that we've rezoned from industrial to other zoning categories across the city, and require that development near highways and major truck streets incorporate noise attenuating windows and HVAC systems to reduce air pollution indoors. It would apply to schools and child care centers and houses. Amendment 76, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, amends the definition of major transit service so that major transit service includes frequent transit service, and therefore any changes to any of the provisions that apply to major transit service areas but not frequent transit service areas, such as exemptions from parking requirements, would apply in areas with frequent transit service.
Amendment number 77, sponsored by Councilmember Saka, would provide a density bonus and modified development standards for cottage housing development. Cottage housing development would be defined as development consisting entirely of 1 or 2-story dwelling units arranged on 2 sides of a common ground level amenity area equal to at least 20% of the lot area that includes usable community green space and trees.
Amendment 78, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would give bonus height and additional floor area to stacked flat projects that incorporate at least 25% of the units having 3 bedrooms or more with a minimum of 1,050 square feet. So, and they need to be near schools. So within a quarter mile of an elementary or secondary school, these family-sized units would be granted a bonus. Amendment 79, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would relax development standards for development projects incorporating a higher level of accessibility. So currently, ground floor units would be required to be what we call Type B accessible, which is a flexible standard that can be adapted to meet the needs of disabled residents. This amendment would incentivize the creation of Type A accessible units that do not need to be adapted, but are rather sort of more immediately available to meet the needs of individuals with significant mobility impairments. The amendment would incentivize the construction of Type A units by exempting them from floor area ratio limits, maximum density, and lot coverage limitations. Amendment 80, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would incentivize balconies on stacked flat projects or apartment buildings by allowing smaller balconies to count toward amenity area requirements, by reducing the amount of common space that is required and allowing more private space to count toward amenity area requirements, and by raising the overall amenity area requirement to 25% of the lot unless every unit above the ground level has a balcony, in which case it would be 20% of the lot area.
Amendment 81 is sponsored by Councilmember Rivera. She mentioned this. It applies a portion of state law that allows for exterior cladding requirements for development within historic districts.
Amendment number 82, sponsored by Councilmember Hollingsworth, would increase the threshold for exceptions from street improvement requirements from 2 units to 4 units to reflect changes to the allowable number of units on a typical 5,000 square foot lot. The effect of this would be to reduce construction costs for smaller projects, but it would also result in reduced street improvements.
All right. Amendment 83 is slightly different. You may remember that the proposed bill, Council Bill 120993, would rezone all residential small lots in the city to low-rise 1. This amendment would rezone a portion of a block in Columbia City from low-rise 1, from RSL to low-rise 2, to reflect that the remainder of the block and surrounding blocks are currently zoned low-rise 2. Sponsored by Councilmember Solomon. I hinted at this one previously. Amendment 84 requires an amendment to the comprehensive plan in order to maintain consistency. It removes parking requirements across the city. And let me jump. It's a very lengthy amendment.
322.
Amendment 103, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. Oh, sorry. I jumped way ahead.
There you go, page 3.
Yeah.
Missed the 3.
No worries, we're just getting caught up here.
There we go. No.
Nope.
No.
3.
It's a big book. Why did the Seattleite cross the road? To yell at city council. It's a good one. Thought that was a good one.
Too far.
Tough crowd.
Sorry.
There we are, page 345. 30.
Okay.
Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
There we go. Sorry about that. Amendment 85, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, and the next couple of amendments would be moot if the previous amendment were to be adopted. Instead of removing parking requirements altogether, it implements a new state law, Senate Bill 5184, that requires the city to reduce parking requirements or eliminate them for some uses. For example, a new small commercial space with less than 3,000 square feet anywhere in the city would be required to, the city could not impose a parking requirement on those kinds of spaces, those size spaces. Amendment 86, sponsored by the council president, would remove parking requirements near frequent transit service areas and specifically within a half mile of a frequent transit service area.
Amendment number 87, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would waive parking requirements for preservation of a Tier 2 tree.
Amendments 88, 89, and 90 are similar, so I'm going to attempt to differentiate them. They're all related to stack flat bonuses and expanding that program. So the first one is Amendment 88 by Councilmember Hollingsworth, and it expands the stack flat bonus by reducing the lot area that is required. So as transmitted, the densest development has an FAR maximum of 1.2, except that it's 1.4 for stacked dwelling units located within a frequent transit service area on larger lots. And that lot size is set at 6,000 square feet in the transmitted legislation. This amendment would reduce that to 5,000 square feet, so making it available to slightly more lots. Amendment 89, sponsored by Council President Nelson, would remove that square footage of lot size entirely, remove the requirement that the stack flat project be located within a frequent transit service area, and increase the FAR bonus from 1.4 to 1.6. It would also increase the lot coverage to 55% from 50%, and it would increase the maximum density slightly by changing one dwelling unit per 650 square foot density max to one dwelling unit per 600 square foot density maximum. So that one is sort of the middle of the road compared to Amendment 90, which goes the furthest, I believe, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle. This would expand the stack flat bonus similarly as the last one to remove the frequent transit service area requirement, remove the square foot of lot size requirement, increase to 1.6 FAR, and reduce the maximum dwelling unit calculation such that maximum density is increased, but would also increase lot coverage to 60% as compared to 50% in the transmitted legislation or 55% in the previous amendment.
All right, amendments. The following couple of amendments are sort of variations on that theme, but with the addition of incentives for provision of additional green space or preservation of trees. Amendment 91, sponsored by Council President Nelson, would increase the FAR for stacked flats from 1.4 to 1.8. It would also allow a differential increase of up to 2 for projects that retain Tier 1 trees, retain 2 two-tier trees, or maintain a green factor score of 0.6. Development that takes advantage of that bonus would be able to access additional density and also higher building heights. Amendment number 92, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, would also expand the stack flat bonus. There would be an addition of the bonus would increase from 1.2 to 2 for stack flat dwellings that meet certain requirements, including retention of a Tier 1 tree or retention of 2 Tier 2 trees. A distinction between this one and the previous version that you saw is there's not a differential bonus, and there's also not the ability to achieve the bonus through a green factor score. It has to be through tree preservation. Amendment number 93, sponsored by Councilmember Rivera, would modify tree planting requirements. Additionally, also provide incentives as well, including reduced setbacks, additional FAR, and additional height on lots that preserve a Tier 2 tree. There's some, maybe this one may need a little bit more elaboration. It also would increase the number of tree points that would be required for development in our zones, and also require a minimum tree planting area for large, medium, and small trees as well. Amendment number 94, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would also have a bonus for a retention of Tier 2 trees. Would allow an exception to height, up to 42 feet in height, for preservation of a Tier 2 tree that achieves a prescribed tree score, and also maintains a 10% canopy coverage at maturity. Amendment number 95, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would reduce side and rear setbacks on small lots near transit and neighborhood residential zones. Amendment number 96, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would allow flexible average 5-foot side setbacks that couldn't be less than 3 feet in neighborhood residential zones, but the side setbacks could be averaged. Amendment number 97, also sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would require larger setbacks on Queen Anne Boulevard. The committee will remember a similar amendment from the interim bill. Amendment number 98, sponsored by Councilmember Rink, would reduce required building separations. Specifically, the distance between buildings could be reduced below a certain threshold, provided that they meet fire separation standards. Amendment number 99, sponsored by Councilmember Kettle, would entirely eliminate NR amenity areas. To the extent the ground level open space is developed it would allow the ground level open space to be used to achieve other goals such as tree preservation. Amendment number 100, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, would provide that there be at least one tree planted for every 2,500 square feet of lot area. Amendment number 101, sponsored by Council President Nelson. You've seen a version of this sponsored by another council member previously. This would mandate parking waivers for any residential development that maintains a Tier 2 tree. Amendment number 102, sponsored by Councilmember Rivera, would provide the SDCI director with the authority to require alternative site plans and some additional procedural discretion to demonstrate that a tree can be preserved and maintain the amount of development allowed on a lot. And I think that is through with mine, Lish.
Amendment 103 from Councilmember Strauss would require the retention of trees, Tier 1 and Tier 2 trees, within 5 feet of the corner of a lot. Amendment 104, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, would provide more development flexibility when trees are protected, including reduced or allowing for greater extension of development into required setbacks and amenity areas and reduction of landscaping and screening requirements and increase of structure width and depth. And the last two amendments are both by Councilmember Strauss. They sort of provide bookends for discussion. They would change the tree protection area regulations. Amendment 105 would set the tree protection area for all trees to be a 6-foot radius from the trunk of a tree. And Amendment 106, and our final amendment, would instead define a tree protection area as the drip line of a tree and remove authority for the SDCI director to waive tree protection or modify tree protection areas. And that brings us to the end.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I forgot I was also running the meeting as well as I was looking through the amendments. So really, really appreciate your time on this. I know that it is a lot, and there's some, and thank you, Councilmember Rivera, for your clarification question on the process, and then also understanding how amendments stack up to each other and what one can do with the other. And so that was super, super helpful. I know we had a lot for stacked flat bonuses, and there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of middle, good, better, best, however you want to define it. And so that's going to be good for us to navigate and try to find consensus on as a body. I will pause here to find out if people have any questions or would like to offer any comments. Just want to recognize we're at 11 o'clock. We have made it through our presentation, and now this is time for discussion. Council Member Rink, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again, team, for walking through all of these and all of your hard work with, I know, my office and I imagine all of our offices in bringing these amendments to this place. Just deeply appreciate you. Taking us all the way back to number 8. Number amendment number 8, does this apply anywhere since we're removing the words where appropriate? Are there areas outside regional centers this could be happening? Where would we revoke this from happening?
I need to look into that a little bit more. We may have some maximum parking limits in our densest industrial areas that might have been built into that proposal, but I'm not 100% sure. Other than that, generally, we only have them in regional centers where the most congestion is likely.
Understood. Okay. Moving along to 21 and 22, these are the amendments pertaining to human services. Could you again explain the main differences between these two amendments?
21, let me jump to 22. So basically the difference is that in 22, it's focused on downtown Seattle. So for example, in that first sentence, consider the needs of target populations and locating human service facilities throughout downtown Seattle. In 21, it says throughout the city.
Mm-hmm.
And similar throughout the policy.
Thank you. For Amendment 25, is there a definition to elaborate which businesses are the smallest?
No. In discussing this with Councilmember Strauss, he mentioned that the Small Businesses Administration classifies businesses with, I think, up to 500 employees as small businesses. And so his intent was not to use that sort of generous definition of small business.
Great. Moving us along to amendment number 41. I think this was one we have a map on this one. I think you had made a comment about some of the inaccuracies, maybe with the map that was included in the package. Could you elaborate on what this map should look like, or what it looks like, what it should look like?
Yeah. So my memory is that it should basically run from Northeast 77th Street to Northeast 70th Street between approximately 36th Avenue Northeast and 34th Avenue Northeast, without the jog in the lower right-hand corner.
Perfect. And curious on Amendment 51, and maybe this is a question for the sponsor, so apologies for putting you on the spot, Councilmember Kettle. I'm curious about the intent behind removing the areas north of Roy Street from the Uptown Regional Center. And we can circle back on that too.
Well, first and foremost, the council designated north of Roy Street up Queen Anne. It's not Uptown, so that's the first point. 2, basically, maintaining integrity of the neighborhood, and did check in with OPCD, and has no impact related to PSRC or anything like that. It's basically, it's not quite like for like, but it's nearly like for like.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember Kettle. 91 and 92, I just have a couple more. Thank you for indulging me, Chair. 91 and 92 is the only difference between these two amendments, the green factor?
I believe so. There may be a slight difference in the amount of FAR. We'd have to confirm that here. Let's see.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's which one is this?
This is Strauss.
Okay. So yes, I think the difference is between 0.2 FAR for Councilmember Strauss, and I believe it's 1.8 for Council President Nelson.
Great.
Notice there's a differential requirement here too. It's 1.8 for stacked flats development, and then there's also the option to go to 2 if you meet a sort of a higher tree protection and green factor standard.
Great. And then 102, my read of this, and hoping that you can clarify, would this mean it would apply to pretty much any tree? I mean, how small of a plant could be protected under this amendment?
102. So in particular, which section are you asking about here? The authority of the SDCI director to require an alternative site plan?
Yes.
Yes, it would apply to any kind of tree.
Any kind of tree?
I believe so. This is one that I feel like I probably should check offline and then respond to all of us so that I'll,
Okay.
so we're on that same page.
Okay. And my last question, it's just on our last two, 105 and 106. Are these mutually exclusive to one another?
Yes.
Great. Easy answer. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those answers. And thank you, Chair. Appreciate the time.
No worries. This is what the time is for. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is very good for this body. I'll pause here. I don't know if Councilmember Kettle, if you had a question, or I don't know who's racing to get to their question. Councilmember Rivera?
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you stated, we're just getting these today, so I think part of the what's happening is that we need to read through these and then be able to get questions answered from central staff and then figure out how, this was my question earlier, why I asked about how do we best handle those that are trying to address similar things but are in conflict with each other. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Rivera. Councilmember Kettle.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to note, like everyone else, I do appreciate the leadership and your staff working through this. This is not easy, and to go along with Mr. Woodson and the team, it's an incredible amount of material, and you've got like sometimes different versions of the same thing, and keeping track of that is probably not fun. I'll admit that. Hopefully, I haven't really contributed to that. Actually more of a statement is, as I'm listening and hearing these things, I think it's really important for us to be mindful that, some of these changes, when it's just a word, can have major, as we say, second and third order effects. And we really need to step through these amendments and to ensure that, we don't go cross purposes. We don't create situations where the intent is one thing, but on the ground for different reasons can be something very different. And particularly when, in my district, I have 3 regional centers, urban center, some neighborhood centers, and then neighborhood residential. I have like the whole mix. And what's good for one part is not necessarily good for the other part. So we have to be mindful on some of these blanket kind of amendments across citywide. We need to be smart on those. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to pass some thanks and also to make those points. And I think we should be, as a body, looking at these and looking to deconflict, but also look to ensure that we move forward in a very I was going to say smart way, but that can be interpreted, but in a way that accounts for all the different pieces, because I can sense some cross purposes here and some conflicts that we may not be truly appreciative of right now. So, so thank you, Chair.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Kettle. And I'm looking to my left. I don't know if Councilmember Saka or Councilmember Juarez have any questions. I know it's a lot. Yes. Awesome. One question I have, is there anything, and I'll probably just take this offline. Are there any amendments that would trigger more environmental impact study pieces?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So after the committee votes, we will need to do some environmental review no matter what, because we're looking at changes to the plan. And that environmental review will look at whether or not there are probable significant adverse impacts, which is a technical term, that weren't studied under the EIS. If there are probable significant adverse impacts, a supplemental environmental impact statement could be required. If we can make the case that the amendments that the council is adopting are basically in line with the analysis that's been done already under the final environmental impact statement for the comprehensive plan, then we will issue an addendum to that EIS, basically stating our rationale and analysis that supports that determination. The EIS addendum requires public notice, but does not provide an opportunity for an appeal, and would allow the council to act on the bills before the end of this year. A supplemental environmental impact statement is a lengthier process, requires more analysis, and probably would preclude the council from acting on the bills this year. So it depends on how far the council wants to go in terms of, and what the impacts of the council's changes are holistically, looking at everything the council's doing.
Understood. Thank you for that answer. Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Lish, thank you for that. And do you know which of these you guys think might trigger that additional environmental, an addendum or a supplemental EIS?
Again, it's going to be dependent on sort of the totality of the council's changes. Some of the changes, like taken together, like for example, if we remove or reduce parking requirements but allow more development, it may be that the transportation impacts balance out from the combination of those changes, because you have fewer cars on the road, so you're not triggering the same intersectional level impacts of the increased growth that you're also allowing in an area. On the other hand, there will be other impacts of reducing parking requirements. For example, you may see more units on a particular lot if people aren't required to provide one parking space per each unit. So we'll be talking with the consultant team that developed the original EIS, and hopefully relying on their expertise to help us sort of parse out where we're going and provide more input to council members about the potential impacts of each of their amendments.
So parking requirements, you're saying might be one. The changes to parking requirements from what got sent down might be something that, any other items
Well,
that?
actually, changes to parking requirements might actually mitigate some of the other impacts, because
Right.
you have less air pollution impacts, you have less transportation congestion impacts if people don't have cars. And there's a relationship between, researchers have found that if you don't provide a parking space with a residential unit, residents of those units are less likely to own a car.
You're saying if things, but what things are you thinking might require? So I understand you saying the parking requirements would mitigate for something, so perhaps don't need supplemental EIS, but what things would the parking requirements be mitigating for? If you understand my question, I can, okay.
Yeah. Any of the amendments that increase the floor area ratio that's permitted, adding or expanding a neighborhood center might lead to additional development in an area where it wasn't contemplated under the EIS. Those leave out as ones that should be considered carefully.
And that's because that wasn't part of the original proposal that was already studied.
Most, but not all, of the neighborhood centers were part of the EIS. They were included in alternatives 2 and 5. but the preferred alternative did look at sort of a collection of neighborhood centers across the city. We would want to go back and analyze what adding those additional neighborhood centers back in does to the sort of pattern of development across the city.
So that may trigger an EIS, a supplemental.
Yeah, and again, we won't know for a while.
Got it. Anything else, Lish, that could come, or Keatle or HB for that matter, that you think might trigger additional
Lish got the big
environmental
ones.
review?
Again, it's sort of, the devil is in the details, and we really won't be able to say until we sort of know kind of what collectively the council has, the direction the council is taking after a committee level vote on all of the amendments. But it's the types of things that Lish mentioned. It's things that may change how much development could happen in different parts of the city. And so that includes things like FAR changes to physical development standards that may make it more likely that something will be developed or a site may be redeveloped, and changes to boundaries as well.
But changes to boundaries to increase, not reduce, I would think. And FAR to increase, not reduce, or, I mean, we're, I guess what I'm trying to, what I am hearing, so I'm trying to check that what I'm hearing is accurate, is that it's mostly related to more development, because that's what would have a bigger impact and hadn't been studied in the original EIS or supplemental.
Right.
Okay.
But if the council allows more development, but also
Mitigates
gives more protection to trees, you know, there's some balancing there that the council will need to do.
Got it. Thanks, Lish.
Awesome, thank you. And I know this is all speculation, and I kind of asked the leading question, so I'm no lawyer, so.
It's a good one.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I will pause there and see if there are if there's any other comments before we wrap up and I talk about the next steps. And I think, Lish, you already did talk about the next steps in terms of timeline. I will talk about it from our perspective, and then we'll go into details. So colleagues, when we first started this process, our office led with the acronym that has grounded our values since day one: welcoming, affordable, accessible, livable, and safe walls. These are not just words, they were and continue to be our North Star. We listened to neighborhoods across the city with a deep focus on the district and the people that call it home, and also people that want to call Seattle home. And the feedback has been powerful. People told us how much they love their blocks, from the close-knit neighbors, accessible schools, walkable parks, multi-generational families, safe streets, tree-lined canopies, strong transit lines. We've heard from everyone. We also heard from people who said, I don't own a car, or the rent is too damn high, or from people that said, don't let them take my home, I can't afford to be here, or people that lived in the Central District and they have been priced out and now they call Kent the Kentral District. It's a mix, and it's real, and it's why we are here. We also can't ignore the truth that Seattle has a history of protecting some neighborhoods over others. And because of that, family roots have been torn out block by block, and culture in Seattle is often sometimes that we experience that's very, festivals or events. It's very seasonal, but we want to see it alive every day on our streets. So yes, I know that we are grieving over trees and we want to protect them. And I also carry that same energy for family roots, tree roots and family roots. They're not mutually exclusive. They can exist together. And we can do this with this comprehensive plan. And if we want more housing, we have to modernize our approach. And that means updating codes, overhauling permitting process, getting creative about looking how other cities do it better, potentially using technology and new tech to make it faster, and prioritizing family, kids, and multi-generational households, because that's the Seattle we love and we want to keep. And I've heard from a lot of you all, that's what we want to do. And I also understand we are not the first caretakers of this land. Our indigenous community is, and some of us have generational roots here. Some of us moved here from the South hoping for better. Some came for college and stayed, some for jobs, some for safety. Whatever reason it is, we are here and we are all welcome in this city. And that comes as a responsibility, and we have to protect and shape others, or shape this place together. And the amendments you heard from me, particularly today, are bonus for accessible units, from balconies, from my travel overseas in Vancouver and Toronto, all the balconies and outdoor space, social housing bonuses, providing policy direction for food access, maritime lands, freight movement. It is a buffet of a lot of things that I heard. Family housing around schools, adding goals for multi-bedroom housing, the conversion of homes to duplexes and triplexes as well. Everyone should have the same opportunity that my family had to convert their house into a duplex, a triplex, to create more housing for folks. And I also want to note that we have to start becoming a young city. And being young in the city and finding housing is an incredible challenge. Not just a challenge that's uphill, but a lot of times people are not winning right now. We are losing that battle and we need more of it. So what is next? We are still early in this process, and this is just the beginning. The amendments will be posted publicly for the next 30 days to gather your feedback. So we have recess between August 16th through September 1st. From now, which is August the 4th, through August the 15th, we have scheduled meetings with all of you all on your calendar so we can find a consensus and understand what your values are. We will return September 2nd. The public hearing will be September 12th at 9:30 a.m. We will post that and the directions for the public hearing, and looking forward to people's feedback between now and then on our amendments, what people want to see, what they didn't see, what they thought they saw, what they thought they understood, and how we can continue to shape and craft this comprehensive plan. The final vote is expected out of this committee between September 17th through the 19th, which we have 3 meetings scheduled that day. So between now and then, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you'd like to change, what's missing, and so we can continue to build this future together. So with that, our next meeting back here with this body particularly will be September 12th, which is a Friday at 9:30 a.m., and that will be our public hearing. But between now and then, colleagues, we have a ton of work to do. We'll be having conversations. You'll be absorbing and reading all of these amendments. We'll find out how they interact with each other, how they flow with each other, and looking forward to continuing that community process with you all. I do want to take this time to just thank Central staff. Everyone has thanked you, but you all have been complete rock stars during this process. And I know you probably have a ton of caffeine in you right now, especially you, Lish, and Keatle, and HB, all 3 of you. But definitely want to send a heartfelt thank you to you all, because I know this has not been an easy process, and your organization, your structure, particularly your professionalism, has been phenomenal during this process. So thank you all, and your expertise. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everyone behind the scenes on the second floor as well. With that, colleagues, are there any other items of business that we have today for this body? Oh, Councilmember Kettle asked me who my favorite is. Everyone sitting at this table is my favorite, just like everyone sitting on this dais is my favorite. But my favorite columnist is sitting here right now, Ryan Packer from The Urbanist, my favorite. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.